The rain was falling heavily that November evening in Portland, Oregon. I could hear the drops drumming against the kitchen windows while I stirred the pot of chicken soup on the stove. The aroma of thyme and bay leaves filled the house, that old Victorian home on Hawthorne Boulevard that my late husband Garrett and I had bought 47 years ago. My name is Theodora Winslow, but everyone has always called me Thea. At 73, I still maintained my independence, my garden, and my dignity. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and my knees complained when I climbed the stairs, but my mind was sharp as ever. I heard the front door open. It was my son, Brennan, and his wife, Cassidy. They came every Thursday for dinner, a tradition I had insisted on maintaining after Garrett passed away 5 years ago. I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron as I walked toward the entrance hall. Brennan was 48, tall like his father, but with my green eyes. Cassidy was 42, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. They had been married for 12 years, and in all that time, I had tried my best to welcome her into our family. "We need to talk, Mom," Brennan said, his voice sounding strange, distant. I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I kept smiling. "Of course, dear. Come sit down. Dinner is almost ready." We sat at the dining room table, that solid oak table where we had celebrated so many Christmases, Thanksgivings, and birthdays. Cassidy looked at Brennan, and he cleared his throat nervously. "Mom, we've been thinking," he began, not meeting my eyes. "You're getting older, and this house is too big for you. The stairs, the maintenance, everything. I'm managing just fine," I replied calmly, though my heart was starting to race. Cassidy leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hands folded on the table. "Thea, we're worried about you. What if you fall? What if something happens and there's no one here to help you? I have my neighbors. I have my phone. I'm not helpless. Tonight we're taking you to a retirement home, so start packing your things," Cassidy said suddenly, her voice cold and direct. The words hit me like a slap. I looked at my son, waiting for him to contradict her, to say it was a joke, a misunderstanding, but he just looked down at his plate. "Brennan," I whispered, "it's for the best, Mom. We've already found a place. Meadowbrook Senior Living. It's very nice. You'll have friends there. Activities." I felt the walls closing in around me. This house, my home, the place where I had raised my son, where I had cried when Garrett died, where every corner held a memory. "And what about this house?" I managed to ask. "We'll take care of it," Cassidy said quickly. "Don't worry about that." Something in her tone, in the way her eyes gleamed, made everything clear. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about the house, about the property that had tripled in value over the years in this gentrified neighborhood of Portland. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. "Excuse me, I need a moment." I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. Once inside, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. But then, something inside me shifted. A spark of the woman I had always been, the woman who had started her own bookkeeping business when Garrett lost his job in the 80s, the woman who had fought for every inch of this life. I wasn't going down without a fight. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photograph on my nightstand. It was from our 30th wedding anniversary. Garrett and I stood on the porch of this very house, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling at the camera. Brennan had taken that photo, our son, who now wanted to ship me off like an unwanted piece of furniture. The rain continued to fall outside, creating a melancholic rhythm against the windows. I could hear muffled voices downstairs. Cassidy's sharp tone cut through occasionally, though I couldn't make out the words. I walked to my closet and pulled out the small fireproof box I kept on the top shelf. Inside were all the important documents: the deed to the house, in my name only, the life insurance policy, the savings account statements, the will I had drawn up 3 years ago with my attorney, Malcolm Rothstein. My hands shook as I opened each document and reviewed them. Everything was still in order. Everything was still mine. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Malcolm's number. It went to voicemail. "Malcolm, this is Theodora Winslow. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. It's urgent. Please call me back tonight if possible." I sat back down on the bed, trying to steady my breathing. "Think, Thea. Think clearly." Through the heating vent in the floor, I could hear them more clearly now. She's being stubborn as usual, Cassidy was saying. We should have just done this while she was at her book club. We can't force her, Mom, Brennan replied weakly. Why not? She's obviously not thinking clearly. This house is worth at least $800,000, maybe more. Do you know what we could do with that money? We could finally buy that cabin in Bend. I could quit that awful job. My blood ran cold. So there it was. The truth laid bare. She'll come around, Brennan said. She has to. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a sheet of my personal stationery. With a steady hand, I began to write. An hour later, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. Mom? Brennan's voice was soft, almost apologetic. Are you okay? I'm fine, dear. I just need some time. We're going home now, but we'll be back tomorrow morning to help you pack. I didn't respond. I listened to their footsteps descending the stairs, the front door opening and closing, the sound of their car starting and driving away. Only then did I allow myself to cry. But my tears didn't last long. I had work to do. I pulled 2 suitcases from my closet and began to pack. Not everything, just what I would need. Clothes, toiletries, medications, my most precious photographs, my mother's jewelry, the hand-knit blanket Garrett's mother had made for our wedding. I worked through the night, fueled by hurt and determination. At 3 a.m, I finally finished. The suitcases stood by the front door, next to a manila envelope containing the letter I had written and several legal documents. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Garrett's old armchair in the living room, watching the rain finally stop and the first hints of dawn coloring the sky. My phone rang at 7:30. It was Malcolm. Theodora, I got your message. What's wrong? I explained everything. He listened without interrupting, his breathing the only sound on the other end of the line. Can you come to my house this morning? I asked. I need a witness for what's about to happen. I'll be there in an hour. Malcolm arrived at 8:30, carrying his leather briefcase and wearing the same concerned expression he had worn when he helped me with Garrett's estate 5 years ago. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Theodora, are you absolutely sure about this? He asked, as we sat in my kitchen over coffee. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He nodded slowly, reviewing the documents I had shown him. Everything is in order legally. The house is yours. The accounts are yours. They have no claim to any of it. I know, but I want them to understand that. I want them to understand who they tried to manipulate. At 9:15, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart began to race again, but this time with a different emotion. Not fear, but resolution. They're here, I said quietly. Malcolm squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing. The doorbell rang. I walked slowly to the door, Malcolm following behind me. When I opened it, Brennan and Cassidy stood there with false smiles plastered on their faces. Behind them, a moving truck was parked on the street. Cassidy's smile faltered when she saw the suitcases by the door. Oh, good. You're already packed, she said, trying to sound cheerful. This will make everything so much easier. Brennan noticed Malcolm. Mr. Rothstein, what are you doing here? I invited him, I said calmly. Please, come in. We need to talk. They exchanged nervous glances, but entered. We all moved to the living room. I remained standing, drawing strength from that position. I'm not going to any retirement home, I began, my voice steady and clear. Mom, we've been through this. Brennan started. No, you haven't been through anything. You made a decision about my life without consulting me, without considering my feelings, without even asking what I wanted. Cassidy crossed her arms. We're trying to help you. Thea, are you? I picked up the manila envelope from the coffee table, because I heard you last night. Through the heating vent. I heard everything. Brennan's face went pale. Mom, I can explain. Can you explain how your wife said this house is worth $800,000 and she wants to use that money to buy a cabin in Bend? Can you explain how this has nothing to do with my well-being and everything to do with greed? Cassidy's face flushed red. You were eavesdropping. In my own home. Yes, I was. And I'm glad I did. Because now I know exactly where I stand with both of you. I handed the envelope to Brennan. Inside, you'll find a letter explaining that I am of sound mind and body, that I am fully capable of living independently, and that any attempt to force me into a care facility against my will would be considered elder abuse. Mr. Rothstein has witnessed and notarized this document. Malcolm nodded. I've also prepared documentation showing that all of Theodora's assets are solely in her name and that she has every legal right to dispose of them as she sees fit. Cassidy stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Brennan, are you going to let her talk to us like this? But Brennan was reading the letter, his hands shaking. What have you done, Mom? He whispered. The silence in the room was deafening. Outside, I could hear the moving truck's engine idling, a sound that now seemed absurd given what was unfolding inside. I sat down slowly in Garrett's chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. What I've done, Brennan, is protected myself from my own son and the woman he married. That's not fair, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you visited me just because you wanted to see me? Not for Thursday dinner, which I cook and serve. Not because you needed something. When was the last time you called just to hear my voice? He couldn't answer. I raised you better than this, I continued, my voice breaking slightly. Your father and I worked 2 jobs each so you could go to college without debt. We helped you with the down payment on your first house. When you lost your job 6 years ago, who loaned you $20,000? That was a loan, Cassidy interjected. We thought it was a gift. I looked at her with an expression that made her shrink back. Nothing in life is a gift, Cassidy. Everything costs something. And right now, you're paying the price for your greed. Malcolm cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the practical matters at hand. Theodora, would you like me to explain the new arrangements? I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. As of this morning, Malcolm said, pulling documents from his briefcase, Theodora has made several changes to her estate planning. First, this house will remain in her name for as long as she lives. Upon her death, it will be sold, and the proceeds donated to the Oregon Food Bank and the Multnomah County Library Foundation. What? Brennan stood up so quickly his chair tipped over. Mom, you can't do that. I can. And I have. This house is mine. I will not have it stripped from me while I'm still alive, and I will not reward this behavior after I'm gone. Cassidy's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. We have rights. We're your family. Family, I repeated bitterly. Family doesn't try to warehouse their elderly mother for profit. Family doesn't stand in that mother's home and count the money they'll make from her displacement. It wasn't like that, Brennan said desperately. I was worried about you. The stairs. The maintenance. Then you should have talked to me. You should have asked what I needed. What I wanted. You should have offered to help with repairs. To check on me more often. To include me in the decision. Instead, you showed up with a moving truck and expected me to go quietly. I stood up, drawing myself to my full height. Those suitcases by the door. They're not for a retirement home. They're for a trip I'm taking. Malcolm has helped me arrange a month-long stay at a bed and breakfast in Cannon Beach. I need time away from here. Time to think about what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have with you going forward. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mom, please, Brennan said, tears now streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to Cassidy. I should have listened to my gut that this was wrong. Yes, you should have, but you didn't. And that tells me something important about who you've become. Cassidy grabbed her purse. I don't have to listen to this. Brennan, we're leaving. But Brennan didn't move. He stood there, looking at me with such profound regret that for a moment, just a moment, I saw the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers for the most beautiful mama in the world. I need you to leave now, I said quietly. Both of you. Malcolm will see you out. 3 days later, Malcolm drove me to Cannon Beach. The November sky was that particular shade of gray that Oregon does so well, but there was a beauty in it, a kind of honesty. The Pacific Ocean stretched out endlessly, waves crashing against Haystack Rock with a force that felt cleansing. The bed and breakfast was called the Sandpiper's Rest, a charming cottage-style home run by a woman named Vera Tansley. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun and laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. Welcome, Mrs. Winslow, she said warmly, as she showed me to my room on the ground floor. I made sure to give you the room with the best ocean view. Malcolm told me you needed some peace. The room was perfect, simple, clean, with a large window overlooking the beach. I could hear the waves from my bed. Thank you, I managed to say, my throat tight with emotion. After Malcolm left, assuring me he was only a phone call away, I unpacked slowly. I hung Garrett's photo on the nightstand, spread my mother's jewelry on the dresser, wrapped myself in the wedding blanket, and cried. I cried for the son I thought I had raised. I cried for the relationship that had crumbled. I cried for the loneliness that had been eating at me long before that terrible Thursday dinner. And I cried for myself, for the woman who had to choose her own dignity over her own child. That evening, Vera knocked softly on my door. I made chicken pot pie for dinner. Would you join me in the dining room, or would you prefer a tray in your room? I'll come down, I said. It's time I stopped hiding. The dining room was cozy, with a fireplace crackling and the smell of buttery crust filling the air. There were 3 other guests, all around my age, a retired couple from Seattle, and a woman traveling alone like me. The woman, who introduced herself as Delphine Carmichael, had kind eyes and a sad smile. First time at Cannon Beach? She asked. No. I came here with my late husband many times, but this is my first time alone. Me too. Well, first time since my divorce was finalized. We talked through dinner, cautiously at first, then with more openness. The retired couple, Morton and Gladys, had been married 46 years and were celebrating their anniversary with a coast trip. The secret is choosing each other every day, Gladys said, squeezing her husband's hand, even on the days you don't like each other very much. After dinner, I walked down to the beach despite the cold. The wind whipped my coat around me, and the salt spray stung my face. But I kept walking, drawn to the rhythmic certainty of the waves. I thought about Garrett, about how he would have handled the situation. He had always been gentler with Brennan than I was, more forgiving. Would he think I was being too harsh? But then I remembered something he told me once, near the end when the cancer was taking him. Thea, don't let anyone, not even our son, make you feel small. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. Promise me you'll remember that. I had promised, and I was keeping that promise now. The days at Cannon Beach settled into a gentle rhythm. I woke early, watched the sunrise over the ocean, had breakfast with Vera and whoever else was staying at the Sandpiper's Rest, then spent my mornings walking the beach. Delphine often joined me. She was 59, recently divorced after 32 years of marriage. Her husband had left her for a younger woman, a cliché she acknowledged with bitter humor. The funny thing is, I saw it coming. She told me one morning as we walked along the tide line. For years, I saw the signs, the distance, the excuses, the way he looked through me instead of at me, but I chose to ignore it because I was afraid of being alone. Are you still afraid? I asked. Every day. But I'm learning that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel invisible. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. Even before Garrett died, I had sometimes felt invisible. As a wife, as a mother, I had become so focused on caring for others that I had forgotten to care for myself. One afternoon, Delphine found me sitting on a piece of driftwood, staring at the water. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked. I was just thinking about my son, wondering if I was too harsh, wondering if I should call him. Do you want to call him? Part of me does. Part of me wants to hear him say he's sorry, that he understands now, that he'll do better. But another part of me knows that forgiveness without change is just enabling. Delphine sat down beside me. My therapist told me something that stuck with me. She said that forgiveness isn't about letting the other person off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. But that doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life the same way they were before. That night, I sat at the small desk in my room and began writing a letter. Not to Brennan, but to myself. A letter acknowledging everything I was feeling, all the hurt and disappointment and grief. I wrote about my marriage, about the good years and the hard years. I wrote about raising Brennan, about the joy he brought me and the fears I had for him. I wrote about my own parents, long gone, and the lessons they had taught me about dignity and self-respect. When I finished, my hand was cramping, and my eyes were tired, but I felt lighter somehow. I folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, which I tucked into my mother's jewelry box. The next day was Thanksgiving. Vera had invited all her guests to share a meal together. She cooked a beautiful turkey with all the traditional sides, and we sat around her dining table like a makeshift family. "What are we grateful for this year?" Morton asked, raising his glass. "I'm grateful for second chances," Delphine said. "I'm grateful for 46 years with this wonderful woman," Morton said, looking at Gladys. When it was my turn, I hesitated. Then I said, "I'm grateful for the strength to choose myself." Everyone raised their glasses to that. That evening, my phone rang. It was Brennan. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before I answered. "Mom?" His voice was tentative, uncertain. "Hello, Brennan. I wanted to call you today, to wish you happy Thanksgiving, to tell you that I miss you. I miss you too. Can we talk? Can I come see you? I'm not ready for that yet." A pause. Then, "I understand. Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said, about what I did. You were right about everything. Words are easy. Brennan, what matters is what you do. I know. That's why I wanted to tell you that Cassidy and I are separating. She moved out last week." I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, my phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what Brennan had just said. "You're separating?" I repeated. "Yes. After everything that happened, I couldn't unsee things anymore. The way she talked about you, the way she prioritized money over family. I realized I'd been compromising my values for years, bit by bit, until I didn't recognize myself anymore. Outside my window, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human drama. "I'm sorry your marriage is ending," I said carefully. "Are you?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it, because I'm not. "I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry I let things get so bad that I almost lost you. You did lose me, Brennan. Maybe not permanently, but you lost the relationship we had, and I don't know if we can get that back." I heard him take a shaky breath. "I know, and I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me or to come back early or anything like that. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. I've started seeing a therapist, and I've been going through old photo albums, remembering who we used to be as a family." A lump formed in my throat. "Your father would be disappointed in how things turned out. I know. I think about that every day, about how I let him down, how I let you both down." We talked for another 20 minutes, a stilted, painful conversation that nonetheless felt like a tiny step forward. When we hung up, I felt exhausted, as if I had run a marathon. Delphine knocked on my door a few minutes later. "I saw you come upstairs looking pale. Everything okay?" I told her about the phone call. She listened without judgment, then said something that surprised me. "My ex-husband called me last week too, wanting to talk, wanting to explain. And you know what I realized? That his explanations don't matter. What matters is what I'm going to do now, how I'm going to live the rest of my life." "What did you tell him?" I told him I hope he finds happiness, but that I'm not interested in being part of his journey anymore. I have my own journey now. Her words resonated with me. I had spent so much of my life being part of other people's journeys. Garrett's wife, Brennan's mother, the bookkeeper who helped local businesses succeed. But who was Theodora Winslow when she was just herself? The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of purpose. I got dressed, had a quick breakfast, and walked into town. Cannon Beach was charming even in late November, with its art galleries and small shops decorated for the approaching Christmas season. I wandered into a small bookstore called The Printed Wave. The owner, a man in his 40s with a gentle smile, greeted me warmly, looking for anything in particular. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I'm looking for books about starting over later in life, about finding yourself after loss." He led me to a section and pulled out several titles. I ended up buying 3 books and a beautiful leather journal. Back at the Sandpiper's Rest, I curled up in the armchair by the window and began to read. One of the books was a memoir by a woman who had left an abusive marriage at 65 and started a new career as a photographer. Another was about a man who had hiked the Appalachian Trail at 70 after losing his wife. These stories of resilience and reinvention filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. That evening, I opened the leather journal and began to write. Not a letter this time, but a list. A list of things I wanted to do, things I had always put off because there was never time, never money, never permission. I wanted to take an art class. I had always loved watercolors but never pursued it. I wanted to volunteer, maybe at the library or the food bank. I wanted to travel, maybe to the San Juan Islands or even farther. I wanted to make new friends, people who knew me as Thea, not just as someone's wife or mother. As I wrote, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, the disappointment and hurt, but alongside it now was possibility. 2 weeks into my stay at Cannon Beach, I received an unexpected visitor. I was in the sunroom reading when Vera came to tell me that someone was here to see me. Who is it? I asked, my heart suddenly racing. He says he's your son. I felt my chest tighten. I wasn't ready. I had told him I wasn't ready, but when I walked to the front entrance, I found not Brennan but a younger man, perhaps in his early 30s, with nervous eyes and my son's same jawline. Mrs. Winslow, he said hesitantly. I'm Carson Winslow, Brennan's son, your grandson. I stared at him, speechless. Carson, the grandson I hadn't seen in over 3 years, not since he had graduated from college and moved to California for a tech job. Carson, I finally managed. What are you doing here? Can we talk? Please? We walked down to the beach, neither of us speaking until we found a sheltered spot near some rocks. The wind was fierce that day, whipping our coats around us. I heard what happened, he said finally, with Dad and Cassidy. About the retirement home thing. He told you. No, my mom told me. His mother, Brennan's first wife, Elena, whom he had divorced when Carson was only 5. Elena had remarried and moved to California, taking Carson with her. The divorce had been amicable, and we had tried to maintain a relationship, but distance and time had weakened those bonds. Elena called me after she ran into Dad at the grocery store. He looked terrible, she said. Lost weight, wasn't taking care of himself. She got him to talk, and he told her everything. So I caught the first flight up here. Why? I asked. Why come all this way? Because you're my grandmother. Because I remember you taking me to Powell's bookstore when I was little, and letting me pick out any book I wanted. Because I remember you teaching me to make chocolate chip cookies and telling me stories about Grandpa Garrett. And because I'm ashamed that I let 3 years go by without coming to see you. Tears welled up in my eyes. You were busy building your life. That's what young people are supposed to do. That's not an excuse. And it's not an excuse for what my dad did either. Grandma Thea, I came here to tell you that I understand if you can't forgive him. But I also wanted you to know that he's really struggling. Not because of the money or the house, but because he realizes what he almost destroyed. We sat in silence for a while, watching the waves crash. Tell me about your life, Carson, I said. Tell me about California, about your job, about whether there's someone special. He smiled, and we spent the next hour catching up. He told me about his work in software development, about his girlfriend Zara, who was a teacher, about his apartment in San Jose with its view of the mountains. We're thinking about getting married next year, he said, and I was hoping you might be there, that you might want to be part of my life again, even if things with Dad are complicated. I would love nothing more, I said, squeezing his hand. That night, Carson joined us for dinner at the Sandpiper's Rest. Vera outdid herself with a pot roast, and everyone was charmed by my grandson. Delphine especially seemed taken with him, asking him about his generation's perspective on relationships and starting over. I think every generation struggles with the same basic things, he said thoughtfully. We just have different vocabularies for it, but at the end of the day, we all want to be seen, to be valued, to matter to someone. After dinner, Carson and I sat by the fireplace. Grandma, he said carefully, I know it's not my place to tell you what to do, but I think Dad genuinely wants to make amends, not just with words, but with actions. What kind of actions? He's been volunteering at a senior center in Portland, helping people with their taxes and paperwork. He said he wanted to understand better what it means to respect and value older people, not see them as burdens. I felt something crack in my chest, some small piece of the wall I had built around my heart. That doesn't fix what he did, I said. No, it doesn't. But maybe it's a start. My month at Cannon Beach was coming to an end. As much as I had grown to love the rhythm of life there, the ocean's constancy, the new friendships I had formed, I knew it was time to go home. On my last night, Vera organized a small farewell dinner. Delphine was leaving the next day as well, heading back to her new apartment in Eugene to start her new job at the university. You've been good for each other, Vera observed as we all sat around the table. Both of you came here broken, and you're leaving stronger. Not unbroken, though, Delphine said with a sad smile. Still broken, just better at carrying it. Maybe that's what healing really is, I said. Not fixing what's broken, but learning to live with the cracks. We exchanged addresses and phone numbers, promising to stay in touch, and I believed we would, in the way that people who have shared profound moments often do. Malcolm picked me up the next morning. As we drove away, I watched the sandpiper's rest disappear in the rearview mirror, feeling both sadness and anticipation. "How are you feeling about going home?" Malcolm asked. "Nervous. Ready. Scared. All of it. Brennan has asked to see you. Several times." "I know. Carson told me. Are you going to meet with him?" "Eventually. But on my terms? In my time?" When we pulled up to my house on Hawthorne Boulevard, I saw that the garden had been tended. The fallen leaves had been raked, the flower beds mulched for winter. There was a note tucked into the screen door. I opened it with shaking hands. It was from Brennan. "Mom, I've been taking care of the house while you were gone. Not because I expect anything, but because it's what I should have been doing all along. Please let me know when you're ready to talk. I love you. Brennan." Inside, I found the house spotless. Not just clean, but cared for. Fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen table. The windows washed. Even the light bulb in the hallway that had been burnt out for months had been replaced. I called Carson. "Thank you," I said when he answered. "For what?" "For going to see your father. For whatever you said to him." "I can see the difference. That was all him. Grandma, I just reminded him of who he used to be. That evening, I sat in Garrett's chair and wrote in my leather journal, 'I am home, but I am not the same woman who left. I have learned that love without boundaries is not really love at all. I have learned that choosing myself is not selfish. I have learned that grief and hope can coexist, that endings and beginnings are often the same moment from different angles.' 3 days later, I called Brennan and asked him to come for coffee. Brennan arrived exactly on time, carrying a small bag from the bakery on Division Street. He looked different. Thinner, yes, but also somehow more present, more real. "I brought your favorite lemon scones," he said quietly. "Thank you." We sat in the kitchen, that same table where this had all begun 6 weeks ago, but everything felt different now. "Mom, I don't know where to start," he began. "Then don't start with apologies. Start with truth. Tell me what happened. How did we get here?" He took a deep breath and began to talk. He told me about the financial pressures he had been under, how his company had downsized and his salary had been cut, how Cassidy had become increasingly bitter and demanding, how he had felt trapped and had started to see my house, my assets, as a solution to problems that ran much deeper. "But none of that is an excuse," he said. "I made choices. I chose to listen to Cassidy instead of my own conscience. I chose convenience over your dignity. I chose wrong. Yes, you did. I expected you to put up a little resistance, maybe, but then go along with it, because you always went along with things. You always put us first. And I took advantage of that. I took advantage of your love." His honesty was like a knife, clean and sharp. "Your father and I didn't raise you to be someone who takes advantage of people, especially not family. I know, and somewhere along the way, I forgot the values you taught me. I got so focused on surviving, on keeping up appearances, on making Cassidy happy, that I lost sight of what really mattered." We sat in silence for a moment, the old kitchen clock ticking on the wall. "I've been thinking a lot about Grandpa Garrett," he continued, "about how he always said that character is who you are when no one is watching. Well, I failed that test, spectacularly. What are you going to do about it?" He pulled out a folder from his bag. "I wanted to show you this. I've enrolled in a financial counseling program. I'm getting help managing money properly instead of always looking for shortcuts. I've started volunteering at the Cascadia Senior Center 3 times a week. And I've been seeing Dr. Yates, that therapist on Belmont, twice a week." He paused, then added, "And I've been meeting with Father Rodriguez at St. Mary's. Even though we're not Catholic, he's been helping me understand accountability and making amends." I was surprised. Brennan had never been particularly religious. "I'm not looking for absolution," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "I'm looking for guidance on how to be a better person, how to earn back trust, even if it takes years." I felt tears welling up, but I blinked them back. "What about Cassidy?" His face hardened slightly. "The divorce will be final in February. She's getting half of my 401k and my car. I'm keeping the house, but only because she didn't want it. It's too small for what she has in mind for her future. Are you bitter? Sometimes, but mostly I'm relieved. Being married to her was like slowly drowning. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, made more money, gave more, it would be enough. But it was never going to be enough because she was never going to be satisfied. That's a hard lesson to learn. Yeah, but necessary. We talked for another 2 hours. He told me about Carson's visit, about how seeing his son had made him realize what kind of father and son he wanted to be. He told me about the men's group he had joined at the community center, other divorced guys trying to rebuild their lives. "I'm not asking you to forgive me yet, Mom," he said as he was leaving. "I'm just asking you to let me show you, over time, that I can be the son you deserve. Time will tell," I said, "but I'm willing to give you the chance." After he left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, feeling the full weight of everything that had happened. The hurt was still there. The betrayal still stung. But alongside it was something else. A small, fragile seed of hope. December arrived with its cold rain and early darkness, but my house felt warmer than it had in years. Not because of any physical change, but because I was finally living in it as myself. For myself. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center. My first attempts were clumsy, the colors bleeding into each other in ways I hadn't intended. But my instructor, a woman named Juniper, with wild gray hair and paint-stained clothes, encouraged me. "Art isn't about perfection," she said. "It's about expression. Let the mistakes be part of the story." I started volunteering at the Multnomah County Library twice a week, helping with the literacy program for seniors. Many of them were immigrants, learning English later in life. Their determination and courage inspired me. One of my students was a 78-year-old woman from Vietnam named Lynn. She had lived in the United States for 40 years, but had never learned to read English because she had always been too busy working and raising her family. "Now my children are grown," she told me in halting English. "Now is my time." Her words echoed in my mind. Now is my time. Brennan and I settled into a new routine. He came for dinner every other week, and we talked. Really talked. Not the surface-level conversations we had been having for years. He told me about his struggles with the divorce, about his fears for his future. I told him about my painting class, about my volunteer work, about the friends I was making. But I also maintained boundaries. When he suggested he could help me with house repairs, I told him I had hired a handyman. When he offered to review my finances, I politely declined. I was learning that allowing help didn't mean surrendering control. Carson and Zara came to visit in mid-December. I adored Zara immediately. She was smart, funny, with a warmth that reminded me of myself at that age. They asked if I would come to California for their wedding in June. "We want you to be part of it, Grandma," Carson said. "Maybe you could do a reading during the ceremony." I would be honored. Delphine called regularly from Eugene. She had settled into her new job and her new apartment. I joined a book club, she told me excitedly, and I signed up for a hiking group. "Thea, I'm meeting people. I'm doing things. I'm actually happy. I'm so proud of you," I said, and I meant it. One evening in late December, as I was putting up modest Christmas decorations, I found myself thinking about the past year, all the pain, all the revelations, all the changes, and I realized something important. I had lost things, the illusion of family harmony, the belief that love was enough, the naive hope that my sacrifices would always be appreciated. But I had gained things too: self-respect, boundaries, a clearer sense of who I was beyond my roles as wife and mother, new friendships, new pursuits, a new understanding of what it meant to live authentically. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small dinner. Brennan came, and Carson and Zara, who had flown up to spend the holidays with both their families. Malcolm and his wife joined us, as did Vera, who was in Portland visiting her own daughter. As we sat around my dining table, the one that had witnessed so much joy and so much pain, I looked at each face. Some relationships here were strained, still healing. Others were new, still being defined. But all of them were real. Before we ate, Carson raised his glass. "To Grandma Thea," he said, "for showing all of us what courage looks like." Everyone raised their glasses, including Brennan, whose eyes were wet with tears. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and I was washing the last of the dishes, I thought about Garrett. I wished he could see me now, see how I had fought for myself, how I had survived. And then I realized he could see me, in whatever way the dead observe the living, and I hoped he was proud. Spring came to Portland with its usual extravagance of cherry blossoms and daffodils. My garden, which I had tended carefully all winter, burst into color. The watercolor paintings I had made of local landmarks hung in the hallway, visible reminders of my ongoing journey. It was April when Brennan came to me with a request. "Mom," he said, "I know this might be too much to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway because I need you to know I'm serious about change." "What is it?" "I'm organizing a support group at the Senior Center for adult children who are caring for aging parents. I want to teach them how to do it right, how to respect their parents' autonomy while still providing help. And I was wondering if you would be willing to come speak to the group, to tell them your story." I was stunned. "You want me to talk about what you did?" "I want you to talk about what you experienced, how it felt, what you needed. Because I think a lot of people don't understand the harm they can cause, even with good intentions." I thought about it for several days. The idea of exposing that painful chapter to strangers felt daunting, but I also recognized the value in it. "I'll do it," I told him, "but only if you're prepared to hear some hard truths spoken publicly." I wouldn't have asked if I wasn't ready for that. The support group met on a Tuesday evening in May. There were about 15 people there, ranging from their 30s to their 60s. Brennan introduced me simply as his mother, then handed me the microphone. I told them my story, not to shame Brennan, but to illuminate what happens when we stop seeing our parents as full human beings with desires, fears, and dignity that must be respected. I talked about the importance of having difficult conversations before making major decisions. I talked about how help and control are not the same thing. When I finished, there was silence, then questions began. Thoughtful, sometimes painful questions about how to balance concern with respect, how to know when intervention is truly necessary, how to avoid the trap of treating parents like children. One woman, probably in her 40s, raised her hand. "How did you forgive your son?" she asked. "Because I don't know if I could. I haven't fully forgiven him," I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't a light switch you flip. It's a process, and I'm still in it. What I have done is decided to allow him the opportunity to earn back my trust, but that's different from forgiveness, and it's definitely different from forgetting. Brennan stood up then. "I want to add something," he said. "My mother's willingness to even speak to me again is a gift I don't deserve. Every day I work to become someone worthy of that gift, and I fail sometimes, but I keep trying because the alternative, losing her completely, is unthinkable." After the meeting, several people came up to thank me. One older man shook my hand with tears in his eyes. "My daughter has been pressuring me to sell my house and move in with her," he said, "but I don't want to. I just didn't know how to say it without seeming ungrateful. You've given me the courage to have that conversation." That's when I realized the true value of what I had been through. It wasn't just about my own healing. It was about lighting a path for others. In June, I flew to California for Carson and Zara's wedding. It was held in a beautiful garden in Napa Valley, with roses climbing trellises and mountains in the distance. I wore a lavender dress I had bought specifically for the occasion and carried a small bouquet of sweet peas. During the ceremony, I read from a book of poems about love and commitment. My voice was steady and clear. Brennan was there too, sitting a few rows behind me. We had driven to the wedding venue together, a 6-hour car ride that had allowed us to talk even more. He told me he had started dating someone, a woman named Ramona who worked at the senior center. "She reminds me of you, Mom," he said. "Strong, independent, doesn't take any nonsense." At the reception, Carson asked me to dance. As we moved slowly to an old jazz standard, he said, "Thank you for not giving up on us. On this family, you gave me a reason not to," I replied. "You reminded me that not everyone forgets what matters." That night, in my hotel room, I wrote in my journal, "Today I danced at my grandson's wedding. Today I was surrounded by love, both old and new. Today I was reminded that families are not perfect, that people fail each other, but that doesn't mean the story has to end there. I have learned that protecting yourself is not the same as hardening your heart. I have learned that accountability is the foundation of real change. I have learned that you can love someone and still maintain boundaries. And I have learned that starting over at 73 is not only possible but necessary. This is not a story with a perfect ending. Brennan and I will never have the uncomplicated relationship we once had. The hurt he caused cannot be erased, but we have something perhaps more valuable now: honesty. We see each other clearly, without the comfortable lies we once told ourselves, and in that clarity, there is hope. Them were. Epilogue. It's been a year now since that November evening when Cassidy announced her plan to send me to a retirement home. A year of profound change, of pain and growth, of endings and beginnings. I still live in my house on Hawthorne Boulevard. I still paint watercolors, though they're getting better with practice. I still volunteer at the library, where my students have become friends. I still speak to Brennan's support group every few months, sharing my story with others who need to hear it. Delphine and I visit each other regularly. She's thriving in Eugene, with a full social life and a new sense of purpose. We laugh about how we met as two broken women at a bed and breakfast and have somehow built ourselves back into something stronger. Brennan continues to work on himself. He's still with Ramona, and I genuinely like her. She doesn't let him slide back into old patterns. When he does, she calls him out, gently but firmly. Carson and Zara are expecting their first child, a girl. They've asked if they can name her Theodora, after me. I cried when they told me. Life is not perfect. Some days I still feel the sting of what happened. Still wonder how my son could have chosen so poorly. Some days I'm lonely, missing Garrett with an intensity that takes my breath away. But most days, I'm okay. More than okay. I'm living a life that's truly mine, not built around others, expectations, or needs. I'm making choices for myself. I'm discovering who Theodora Winslow is, separate from who she was to others, and that, I've learned, is its own kind of victory. The lesson I've learned, the one I try to share with others, is this: love should never require you to diminish yourself. Family should never demand you surrender your dignity. And age does not mean you forfeit your right to autonomy, respect, and a life lived on your own terms. We teach people how to treat us. And sometimes, teaching that lesson requires courage, boundaries, and the willingness to walk away from those we love, even if only temporarily. Not every story has a happy ending, but every story can have an honest one. And in honesty, I've found something I never expected: peace. The rain is falling again tonight, the way it does in Portland. But inside my house, I'm warm, I'm safe, I'm myself. And that, after everything, is enough. Epilogue. It's been a year now since that November evening when Cassidy announced her plan to send me to a retirement home. A year of profound change, of pain and growth, of endings and beginnings. A year that has taught me more about myself, about family, and about the true meaning of love than all the 72 years that came before it. I still live in my house on Hawthorne Boulevard. Every morning, I wake up in the bedroom I shared with Garrett for over 40 years, and I feel grateful, not just for the roof over my head or the memories embedded in these walls, but for the fact that I fought for my right to stay here, to make my own choices, to live on my own terms. The house looks different now, though. The living room walls display my watercolor paintings, 12 of them so far, each one documenting a place in Portland that holds meaning for me. There's Haystack Rock at sunset, the Japanese garden in spring, the view from Council Crest on a rare clear day. They're not masterpieces, but they're mine. Each brushstroke represents a piece of myself I've reclaimed. My Tuesday and Thursday mornings are spent at the Multnomah County Library, where I continue to volunteer with the literacy program. Lynn, my first student, can now read the newspaper independently. Last week, she read me a letter she had written to her daughter in Vietnamese, accented but clear English. We both cried. The program has grown. There are now 8 of us volunteer tutors, and we've started a social group that meets once a month for coffee and conversation. These women and men, ranging from their 50s to their 80s, have become genuine friends. We celebrate each other's victories and support each other through struggles. Last month, when one of our members lost her husband, we all showed up at her door with food, flowers, and presents. This is what community looks like, I've learned. Not the obligatory family dinners where resentment simmers beneath polite conversation, but genuine connection based on mutual respect and shared values. My watercolor class continues every Wednesday evening. Juniper, my instructor, has become a dear friend. She's 68, never married, no children, and living what she calls her best life. She travels, she paints, she teaches, she loves freely without attachment. At first, I pitied her for not having a family. Now I recognize that she simply built a different kind of family, one based on choice rather than obligation. She's teaching me that there are many ways to live a meaningful life, and that the traditional path I followed, marriage, children, self-sacrifice, is not the only valid one. It wasn't even necessarily the right one for me, though I don't regret the life I built with Garrett or the son I raised. I just wish I had maintained more of myself along the way. Delphine and I talk on the phone every Sunday evening. It's become our ritual, an hour-long conversation where we share the week's events, our thoughts, our fears, our small victories. She's thriving in Eugene. The university job turned out to be perfect for her, and she's since been promoted to department coordinator. She's dating someone new, a history professor named Stuart, who treats her with the respect and attention she deserves. But more importantly, she's learned to be happy alone. She has her own apartment that she decorated exactly as she wanted. She takes weekend trips by herself. She's learned to cook for one without feeling lonely. She's discovered that her own company is enough. I'm learning that lesson too, though it doesn't come easily after a lifetime of defining myself through relationships with others. Last month, Delphine came to Portland for a visit. We spent 3 days exploring the city like tourists, eating at restaurants we'd never tried, visiting Powell's bookstore where I bought her a collection of Mary Oliver poems, walking through the Rose Garden in Washington Park. On our last evening, we sat on my back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For showing me what courage looks like. When I met you at Cannon Beach, I was so lost. I kept thinking about going back to my ex-husband, even though I knew he'd hurt me again. But watching you stand your ground with your son, watching you choose yourself even when it hurt, it gave me permission to do the same." "We all need permission sometimes," I said, "even to make choices that are clearly in our best interest. Why is that? Why do we need someone else to tell us it's okay to take care of ourselves? Because we're taught from birth that self-sacrifice is virtue, especially for women. We're taught that putting ourselves first is selfish, that our needs matter less than others. Wants. It takes conscious effort to unlearn that. The relationship with Brennan has evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. We meet for dinner every other Sunday now, usually at a neutral restaurant rather than my home. The boundaries I've established aren't about punishment but about protection, about creating a relationship that's sustainable and healthy rather than one that drains me. He continues to see Dr. Yates twice a week. He's told me some of what they discuss: his patterns of conflict avoidance, his tendency to lose himself in relationships, his deep-seated fear of disappointing people that ironically led him to disappoint the people who mattered most. He's learning to sit with discomfort, rather than making impulsive decisions to escape it. The divorce from Cassidy was finalized in February, as he'd predicted. I didn't attend the proceedings, but Brennan called me afterward. "It's done," he said. "I'm officially starting over. How do you feel? Scared? Relieved? Free? All of it. That's honest. I'm trying to be more honest. About everything. With myself, with you, with the people I meet." He's been dating Ramona for 6 months now. I've met her 3 times, and each time I've liked her more. She's 51, divorced for 10 years, with 2 adult children who live on the East Coast. She's a social worker at the Cascadia Senior Center, which is how they met when Brennan started volunteering there. What I appreciate most about Ramona is her directness. She doesn't tiptoe around difficult subjects or pretend everything is fine when it isn't. When Brennan starts to slip into old patterns, being agreeable at the expense of honesty, overcommitting himself to please others, she calls him on it immediately. During our last dinner together, the 3 of us at a Thai restaurant on Belmont, I watched their interaction carefully. He suggested they visit his friend's cabin for the weekend, even though she had mentioned wanting to attend a workshop that same weekend. I saw her face tighten. "Brennan," she said calmly, "I told you about the workshop 2 weeks ago. I even showed you the brochure." "Oh, right. I forgot. We can go to the cabin another time. Is that what you want? Or are you just saying that?" He paused, actually considering the question rather than giving an automatic answer. "Both. I want to see my friend, but I also want to support what's important to you. So we'll figure it out. Maybe I can go to the cabin solo. Give us both space to do our own things." She smiled and squeezed his hand. "That's growth right there." Later, as Brennan walked me to my car, he said, "I know I still have a long way to go, but I'm trying. Mom, every day I'm trying." I can see that, and I'm proud of you for doing the work, even when it's uncomfortable. Do you think you'll ever forgive me completely for what I did? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Some hurts run too deep to fully heal, but I've learned that forgiveness isn't necessary for love. I can love you and still carry the memory of how you hurt me. I can hope for your growth and still protect myself from being hurt again. Life isn't binary. Relationships aren't either. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what I'm capable of giving right now. And that has to be enough. The support group that Brennan organized at the senior center has become remarkably successful. What started as 15 people meeting every other Tuesday has grown to over 40 regular attendees, with 2 additional groups formed to accommodate everyone. Brennan leads one group, and a woman named Patricia, whose own experiences with her aging father opened her eyes to the importance of this work, leads the others. I speak to the groups quarterly now, sharing my story but also facilitating discussions about respect, autonomy, and the complex dynamics of caregiving. The conversations are always rich and often emotional. People cry. People share their own stories of failure and shame. People ask hard questions. Last month, a man in his 50s stood up during one of my presentations. "My father is 83, he said, his voice shaking. "He's having trouble managing his finances, and I'm terrified he's going to lose everything. But every time I try to help, he shuts me down. He says I'm treating him like a child. How do I help someone who won't accept help?" I thought about this question for a moment before responding. Have you asked your father what kind of help he would accept? Or have you come to him with solutions you've already decided on? He was quiet. "I've come with solutions," he admitted. "That's natural. You see a problem. You want to fix it. But your father's dignity is more important than your comfort. Instead of saying, 'I'm taking over your finances,' try saying, 'I'm worried about some things I've noticed. Can we talk about it? What would be helpful to you?' But what if he says nothing is helpful? What if he refuses all support and makes terrible decisions? Then those are his decisions to make. Unless he's been legally declared incompetent, he has the right to make bad choices. Your job isn't to protect him from all consequences. Your job is to love him, to be available when he's ready to accept help, and to respect his autonomy even when it scares you. But that's so hard. Yes, it is. But the alternative is what my son did to me. He decided he knew what was best. He disregarded my feelings and my agency, and he nearly destroyed our relationship permanently. Is that really the legacy you want?" The room was silent. Then the man nodded slowly. No, it's not. These conversations matter. I see it in people's faces, in the way they linger after the sessions to ask follow-up questions, in the emails I receive thanking me for my honesty. My pain has purpose now. My experience has become a teaching tool, and that provides a kind of meaning that helps balance the hurt. Carson and Zara's daughter, Theodora Rose, called Rosie by everyone, was born in early October. I flew to California to meet her when she was 2 weeks old. Holding that tiny baby, seeing my name carry forward into a new generation, felt like redemption somehow. Carson was a natural father, attentive and gentle. Zara was exhausted but radiant, and I got to be the grandmother I had always wanted to be, but never quite managed with the distance and complications of Carson's childhood. I stayed for a week, helping with meals and laundry, and holding Rosie while Zara slept. On my last evening there, Carson and I sat on their apartment balcony while Zara and the baby napped inside. "Grandma," he said, "I want to thank you for everything you've taught me. About boundaries, about respect, about standing up for yourself. You don't need to thank me." Yes, I do. Because watching how you handled Dad's betrayal, how you didn't just collapse or give in or pretend it didn't happen, it taught me what I want my marriage to look like, what I want my relationship with Rosie to look like when she's grown. Tell me, I want Zara to always know she can be honest with me, even when it's uncomfortable. I want Rosie to grow up seeing a father who respects women's autonomy, who doesn't see caregiving as control. I want to be different than Dad was. Better. You will be. You already are. When Rosie grows up, he continued, I'm going to tell her about you. About what you did. Not to shame Dad, but to teach her that she always has the right to stand up for herself, no matter who's trying to diminish her. Tears streamed down my face. That's the greatest gift you could give her, and me. Brennan visited Carson and Rosie too, though we carefully scheduled our visits so we wouldn't overlap. It wasn't about avoiding each other, but about recognizing that our relationship still needed space and time. Carson reported that Brennan was wonderful with the baby, gentle and present in a way he apparently hadn't been when Carson was young. "He's trying to get it right this time," Carson said, "even if it's as a grandfather instead of a father." "That's something," I replied. "Growth is always something." My Tuesday evenings have become sacred time for myself. I turn off my phone, make a simple dinner, and spend the evening reading, painting, or simply sitting in silence. At first, this felt indulgent, even wrong. I kept thinking I should be doing something productive, something for someone else. But Juniper challenged me on this. "Why is rest not productive?" she asked. "Why is time spent nurturing yourself not valuable? You spent decades caring for others. Now you get to care for yourself. That's not selfish. That's survival." She was right, of course. And slowly, I've learned to embrace these evenings without guilt. I've learned that my own company is not just tolerable, but genuinely pleasant. I've learned that I'm interesting to myself, that my thoughts and feelings matter even when no one else is witnessing them. Last Tuesday, I spent the evening going through old photo albums. There was Brennan as a toddler, covered in mud and grinning. There was our family vacation to Crater Lake when he was 12. There was his high school graduation, his first wedding, Carson's baby pictures. Looking at these photos, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Nostalgia for those simpler times, sadness for what we've lost, but also gratitude for what we had, even if it couldn't last in that form. One photo stopped me. It was from maybe 15 years ago, at one of our Thursday dinners. Garrett was still alive, sitting at the head of the table. Brennan and Elena were there with young Carson. I was serving pie, caught mid-laugh at something someone had said. I looked happy in that photo, but I also looked tired, strained around the eyes. I was already sacrificing too much, already losing myself in service to others. I just didn't know it yet. If I could go back and tell that woman anything, what would I say? Your needs matter. Your feelings matter. Love yourself as much as you love them. Would she have listened? I don't know. Sometimes we need to learn lessons the hard way, through pain and loss and betrayal. Sometimes we need to be broken before we can be remade into something stronger. The holidays were complicated this year, the first since everything changed. Carson and Zara couldn't travel with a newborn, so there would be no family gathering. Brennan invited me to spend Christmas with him and Ramona, but I declined gently. "I think I need a quiet Christmas this year," I told him. "Just me and my memories." He looked disappointed but didn't push. "I understand. But you won't be alone on Christmas Day, right? You'll have somewhere to go if you change your mind." "I'll be fine, Brennan. I promise." On Christmas Eve, I attended the candlelight service at the Unitarian church I had started attending. The minister, a woman in her 40s named Rebecca, spoke about finding light in darkness, about how sometimes we need to lose our way completely before we can find our true path. After the service, several people invited me to join them for Christmas dinner. The Hendersons, a couple I'd met at the library, Juniper, who was hosting a gathering for her artist friends, even Lynn, who wanted me to experience a Vietnamese-American Christmas with her large, boisterous family. I was touched by each invitation, and I seriously considered them. But in the end, I chose to spend Christmas Day alone. I woke up late, made myself a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, and opened the presents I had bought for myself. A new set of watercolor brushes, a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe, a cashmere throw blanket in deep blue. In the afternoon, I called Carson and cooed at baby Rosie over video chat. I called Delphine, and we laughed about our first Christmas as truly independent women. I even called Brennan and thanked him again for his invitation. Told him I hoped he was having a good day with Ramona. Then I spent the evening watching old movies, wrapped in my new blanket, drinking hot chocolate with a splash of peppermint schnapps. It was, perhaps, the most peaceful Christmas I'd had in decades, because I wasn't performing for anyone. I wasn't cooking elaborate meals, or managing other people's expectations, or swallowing disappointments. I was simply existing in my own space, on my own terms. This is what I've learned this year, that being alone is not the same as being lonely, that choosing yourself is not selfish, that boundaries are not walls, but bridges to healthier relationships. That forgiveness is complicated and nonlinear and sometimes impossible, and that's okay. I've learned that love without respect is just a pretty word, that family is as much about choice as about blood. That age brings not diminishment, but clarity, if we're brave enough to embrace it. I've learned that the story isn't over until I say it's over, that I get to write the ending, even if it's not the ending others wanted for me. My relationship with Brennan will probably never be what it once was. There's a wariness now, a carefully maintained distance that protects us both, but there's also honesty. We see each other clearly now, without the comfortable illusions that once softened the hard edges. Is that better? I don't know. It's different. And different is what we needed. Some days I miss the ease of our old relationship, when I could pretend everything was fine, and he could pretend he respected me while slowly taking control of my life. But those days were built on lies, and lies eventually collapse. What we have now is sturdier, if less comfortable. It's built on truth and accountability, and the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding trust. It may never be warm, but it's real. And real, I've learned, is worth more than comfortable. As I sit here tonight, on the cusp of a new year, I think about what I want for the next chapter of my life. I'm 74 now. If I'm lucky, I might have another 10 or 15 years, maybe 20. However many years I have left, I want them to be lived fully, authentically, without apology. I want to keep painting, to see if I can get good enough to show my work in one of the local galleries. I want to travel more, maybe back to Cannon Beach, maybe to places I've never been, maybe to visit Carson and Rosie more often. I want to deepen my friendships, to invest in the relationships that nourish me rather than drain me. I want to write my story down, not just in my journal, but in a form others might read, because I think my story matters, not because it's unique. Sadly, too many women have experienced similar betrayals, but because it might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. I want to continue speaking to groups about elder respect and autonomy, to be a voice for those who haven't yet found their own voice. I want to learn to play the piano, something I've always wanted to do but never had time for. I want to sit in my garden on summer evenings and feel completely at peace with the choices I've made. I want to be, fully and completely, myself. Is this a happy ending? Not in the traditional sense. My family is fractured. My son and I have a relationship, but it's complicated and may always be. Some wounds have healed, but the scars remain visible. But it's an honest ending, and in that honesty, I've found something more valuable than happiness. I've found myself. I am Theodora Winslow. I am 74 years old. I am a widow, a mother, a grandmother. I am an artist, a volunteer, a friend. I am a woman who was nearly discarded, but who fought for her dignity and won. I am not perfect. I still have moments of doubt, of loneliness, of wondering if I did the right thing. I still miss the simplicity of believing my family loved me unconditionally, even though I now know that love was conditional on my compliance. But I am here. I am standing. I am living a life that belongs to me, and that, after everything, is enough. The rain has started again, drumming softly against the windows, but inside my house on Hawthorne Boulevard, I am warm, I am safe, I am home, not because of the walls around me, but because I've finally found home within myself, and that is a place no one can ever take away from me again. Tomorrow, I will wake up and paint. I will call Delphine. I will volunteer at the library. I will live my life according to my own design. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that, this is my ending. Bittersweet, complicated, real, and it's the only ending I would choose.